It is no secret that I'm a bit of a Type Moon fan. I've already talked about Mahio in the Tsukihime remake, but never have I gotten the opportunity to talk about arguably their most popular series, Fate. Fate Stay Night is a massively important visual novel that captured the hearts of many with its endearing cast of characters and thrilling narrative. It's the work that truly gave the writer, Kinoku Nasu, legendary status. With Fate Stay Night being so incredibly popular, it was inevitable that Type Moon would cash in on this success by creating spin-offs. There's a plethora of Fate spin-offs, like Fate Zero, Fate Prisma Ilia, Fate Strange Fake, Fate Apocryphia, Fate Grand Order, Fate Samurai Remnant, Fate Requiem, and of course, today's menu for the Emiya family. These spin-offs are of mixed quality due to being worked on by several different writers besides Nasu, and some fans get kind of annoyed by how many Fate spin-offs there are while Tsukihime is constantly neglected. However, I believe that while Type Moon might milk Fate a bit too much, some of these spin-offs are quite good, like Strange Fake. This brings us to the subject of this video, Fate Extra. Fate Extra is one of those good spin-offs. So good, in fact, it spawned a kind of sub-series in itself, all set in the Extra universe. There's Fate Extra CCC, a sequel of sorts. Then there's Fate Extella and Fate Extella Link, two Musou games that are separate from the events of Extra, but still set in the same universe. There's also manga like CCC Foxtail, which also portray a different series of events from the game, but exist in the Extra world. There's the anime, Fate Extra Last Encore, which is not actually an adaptation of the game, but yet another story that uses Extra as a base to tell an entirely new story that's a pseudo-sequel. Today I'm going to talk about the original Fate Extra and what makes it stand out among all these other spin-offs. Fate Extra is a game for the PlayStation Portable, home to many niche Japanese games. It was released in 2010, with an official English release coming out a year later. This made it one of the first Fate games to get an official English release, way before Fate Stay Night itself. Imagine playing this without first playing Fate Stay Night, which I suppose is possible, but is strange to think about. Fate Extra begins with a modest prologue. The game has you take the role of an unnamed high school boy, as some strange things start happening around him. What's most interesting about this prologue is how it subverts expectations fans of Fate Stay Night would have. The game immediately shows you characters you should be familiar with, like Issei, Shinji, Taiga, Sakura, and Rin. The school uniforms are all very similar as well, so you think that maybe the school setting is the same one from Fate Stay Night. However, these expectations are first subverted with the introduction of a man introducing himself as a replacement teacher named Kazuki, like Suichiro Kazuki in Fate Stay Night. He's obviously not the same guy though, and his dark aura is at odds with the otherwise peaceful school life that the protagonist has gone through until now. The introduction of the transfer student, Leonardo Bistaro Harue, follows soon after and marks someone completely new and unfamiliar enroaching to what you believe to be the same Fate Stay Night. Strange things keep piling up and it becomes clear the world isn't what it seems. It's eventually revealed that reality isn't real. Fate Extra actually takes place within the Moon Cell, a magical supercomputer that's also the moon, kind of. Everything in the game is within a simulated reality, like the Matrix. Some characters are literal NPCs, virtual intelligence based on real people who exist to manage the Holy Grail War. These NPCs include Issei, Sakura, and Katomine Kure. Then there's all the real people, mages who have hacked into the Moon Cell in order to attempt to claim the Holy Grail, like our protagonist, Shinji and Leo. The entire prologue was actually the preliminaries for the Holy Grail War, where the mages had to realize that their memories and world itself was all a fabrication. I think this prologue is really good. It's short and sets up many of the important characters to the story, like Leo and Rin. Furthermore, there's some very interesting foreshadowing here that you might not pick up on in initial playthrough. I very much enjoyed the slow start and how the protagonist's peaceful life, while fake, were completely shattered. It reminded me a lot of the prologue of Kingdom Hearts 2. Both Roxas and our protagonist investigate odd occurrences around them, culminating in them both realizing their world and memories are all part of a virtual simulation. They both ultimately meet a tragic fate, making way for the true protagonists of their stories. Is Nasu a Kingdom Hearts fan? At this point, I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Anyway, back to Extra. After the prologue, we're finally put into the role of the real protagonist of the game. You can choose their gender and name, while you can name them whatever you want. There's a canon name that they have in manga adaptations and such, which is Hakuno Kishinami. I name my character that, and will be referring to them as Hakuno for simplicity. As for their gender, personally I prefer female Hakuno. I think it's a much cuter design compared to male Hakuno, it looks rather plain in comparison. Plus, female Hakuno basically turns Extra into a Yuri game, as even as a girl, the other main girls have a thing for Hakuno. With Hakuno, you're given a slightly different perspective on some events of the prologue. It doesn't take long for you to choose which servant you want. You have 3 options: Saber, Archer, and Caster. This decision is huge, as it not only decides your companion with whom you'll develop a relationship with throughout the game, but it also impacts how you interact with the gameplay. Yeah, this option also serves as a soft difficulty select. Saber is the most straightforward and simple character. He has decent starting stats and good stat growths. He's all about beating enemies down with raw strength. You only really need to worry about investing in strength and defense. Very basic, but this causes a normal difficulty curve throughout the game. Archer's playstyle is somewhat similar, with an emphasis on physical attacks and combos. However, his stat growths aren't that great. Like, agility is one of the stats that levels up the fastest for him, yet it's one of the most useless stats in the game. Meanwhile, strength doesn't level up nearly as fast, which is problematic. He's more reliant on using skills to do good damage, so you want to spread his stats a bit more evenly between attack, defense, and magic. He's an odd character to play as compared to Saber, but he has some fun skills that let him control the flow of battle. Lastly is Caster. She's supposed to be the most difficult servant to use, being true to the original visual novel, which said that Sabers are really strong, but Casters aren't exactly great with one-on-one battles. So naturally, Caster would be the one that's the hardest to use, yet also the most rewarding. Caster has the durability of a wet paper bag and strength to match. Yeah, in the early game, playing with her can be rough. She dies in a few hits, while enemies take longer for her to kill compared to Saber and Archer because of her pitiful strength. You'll likely die playing as her a lot. Her true potential doesn't shine until she starts unlocking her skills. That is where she excels as a caster. I should mention that skills in this game are insanely busted, with them essentially being free attacks that skip enemies' actions, with the only drawbacks being the cost to the servant's MP. Caster's skills can also stun enemies if you guess their attacks right, giving you a free action after. Even after you start unlocking her skills, you might struggle with her MP. Servant MP is the resource that's hardest to get back. There are items that can restore Hakuno's MP, but hardly any that can restore your servant's MP. Fortunately, Caster's kit has a solution to that as well. She eventually unlocks a skill called Spirit Theft that can replenish some of her MP when she hits an enemy with a break attack. This goes perfectly with her ability to stun enemies. If you can guess right and follow up a stunned enemy with a break, you can replenish a bit of the MP that you spent. Ideally, you want a loop of skill break, skill break. You get the idea. If that isn't enough, she has another skill that can replenish her MP that also serves as an incredible guard, giving her more MP the stronger the attack the skill guards are. It is a phenomenal skill that makes it so Caster can survive even the enemy's strongest attacks, while also restoring MP. But wait, there's more. She also has a skill that buffs the next magic skill she uses, which can cause massive damage. While activating this skill leaves her vulnerable during that action. If you use it during a time you know the enemy will guard, or is stunned, she'll be safe and can buff herself without worry. So yeah, Caster's skill set is kinda busted. By the end of the game, she's by far the strongest of the servants, able to completely clown on the final 2 bosses of the game with effortless ease. You can deal tons of skill damage without the enemy being able to retaliate, a fantastic MP restoring guard, and even an award-winning personality. The only problem is overcoming that initial difficulty in the beginning of the game. Fortunately, I have the perfect strategy to make playing as Caster as painless as possible. First, you're going to want to invest in strength, which may sound odd for Caster, but it'll make the tedium of beating enemies in the early game a bit better. Get strength to D, then ignore it completely. Next, you'll want to invest your level up points between defense and magic. Get defense to C, just so she won't die quite so easily. After defense is at C, focus everything into magic. Now you're really Caster maxing. Using this quick build guide while keeping in mind what I said about using Spirit Theft, and you can play Caster like a pro. Now that the brief overview of each servant is done, which one is the best? Besides differing in gameplay, each servant has their own thoughts and reactions to other characters in the story, as well as having a unique relationship with Hakuno. I think each of the 3 adds their own unique flavor to the game. Is it enough to justify playing through the game 3 times, one for each servant? Your mileage may vary. I'd say that just one playthrough for the one you find most interesting is enough. But I know people who really love the game would play it 3 times for each of them. Personally, Caster is my favorite. He has the most rewarding gameplay progression, and I just love my fox wife. He's so perfect. Saber and Archer have their own merits. In particular, I think it's neat how Archer's dialogue can be slightly different depending on if Hakuno is male or female. Saber is just a lot of fun all around. Back to the story. Hakuno is saved by their servant, and has now formally entered into the Holy Grail War, continuing the idea of subverting expectations. This Holy Grail War is very different compared to the Grail War in Fate Stay Night. While Fate Stay Night was a free-for-all battle royale type of thing, Extra's Grail War is in a tournament style. 128 mages enter this war and are paired off until only one is left to claim the Holy Grail and have their wish granted. Each week, Hakuno is assigned a new opponent, and given that week to prepare for the battle. While this Holy Grail War might sound more organized, in true Fate fashion, there's still room for subterfuge. Many of the enemy masters have sneaky tactics and will try to take Hakuno out during the preparation period. What I really love about Fate Extra is how much importance it places on figuring out the enemy servant's true name. During the preparation period, the game will drip feed the player clues about their identity, until right before the decisive battle, where you have to put the clues together and uncover their identity. It really emphasizes how knowing your enemy can give you the edge in battle. Literally, because if you successfully figure out their identity, you'll be able to see more of their actions during the battle. Even the identity of your own chosen servant is kept a secret from Hakuno for a majority of the game. When their true name is finally revealed, it really felt like the culmination of the relationship of trust you've built up with your servant. It was satisfying, in much the same way finding out Saber's true name was in Fate Stay Night. It brought back the wonder of seeing a new servant and wondering what historical figure they're based on. Or at least it would have, if Fate Grand Order didn't already ruin all of their identities for me. Even if you don't engage with FGO. Seeing all the fan art is kind of inevitable, and you'll probably recognize the servants in Extra. I can only imagine how much more intriguing it was playing this when it was released, not knowing any of the servants' true names. Anyway, the gameplay loop is this. You were assigned an enemy master at the beginning of the week. Then you were given 7 days to prepare. You spend these days running around the school talking to other characters. You can also visit the chapel to perform what is called an alteration of the soul. It's how you strengthen your servant by investing points you get from leveling up into their stats. Most interestingly, these alterations of the soul are handled by Toko and Ayako Aozaki, the famous sisters that are important to the Nasoverse. You may remember them from Mahia. I always found it odd that Toko's hair is blue here. I assume it's like this as a reference to her original design. Anyway, you end the day by entering the dungeon, a place where you grind for levels and get keys for progression. Getting these keys is simple. There's 2 of them, one on each floor of the dungeon. They're always near the end of the dungeon. You should be able to get it as soon as the full dungeon is available to you. In addition, these dungeons will frequently have story scenes while you come into conflict with your opposing master and servant duo. These scenes and small battles give you a taste of what your opponent is capable of. This kind of tournament-style gameplay loop is rather unique. I've only played another game series like it. That series will be Toshin Toshi, the Alistaff classic first released in 1990 and technically set on the same continent as the Rant series. These games are also built around the titular Toshin tournament, where the protagonist is given a week to prepare for the upcoming match. There's an underground dungeon filled with monsters to train in, and much like the keys in Extra, you need to retrieve a hero's crest from the dungeon to enter the tournament. Even the master and servant pairs are somewhat similar to the male-female pairs that enter the Toshin tournament. Yet you need a female partner to enter the tournament, and when someone wins a match, they can do whatever they want to the opponent's female partner. This is an eroge series after all. Of course, you also get the interactions and confrontations between the protagonist and their next opponent during the preparation period. With all these similarities, I strongly suspect that Toshin Toshi may have been an inspiration when designing the game. Toshin Toshi 2 in particular is considered an eroge classic and one of Alistaff's most beloved games. Nasu has mentioned Alistaff games in a few interviews, so he has very likely played these games. Back to Extra. I spent all this time talking, and I haven't really touched on the battle system itself yet. The gameplay of Fate Extra is its most infamous aspect, which seems to scare some people away from this game. For those who don't know, Extra doesn't employ a traditional JRPG turn-based battle system. Instead, you get a system where you have 6 actions a turn, and try to counter your opponent's actions. You have 3 options for an action: attack, guard, and break. Attack is able to hit before an enemy's break. Break can break through guard, and guard protects against attack. In the case that you and the opponent choose the same action, you'll either both be damaged or neither will be damaged. If you both guard, nothing will happen. If you get 3 successful hits in a row, you get an extra combo attack. Yeah, this system is literally just rock, paper, scissors. There are games that use rock, paper, scissors elements like Fire Emblem's Weapon Triangle or Pokemon's elemental weaknesses, but I don't think I've seen a game so completely built around it like this. This battle system is intuitive and easy to understand, however it's not especially interesting. The system gets tiresome quickly because there's not much variety to it. You can also use code casts, which are special abilities that are tied to what gear you're wearing. They typically support abilities like a heal or stat buffs. but there's a few unique ones that can stun enemies in the dungeon so you can avoid them. Still, these code casts aren't enough, and I mostly ended up using those buffs in boss fights. It doesn't help that the enemies you face in dungeons just don't look very good. Seriously, what am I even fighting? 2 blocks chained together? Weird fish? I know that we're in the Matrix, but these designs are kinda silly and are constantly reused even in the later dungeons. The funny thing is, these goofy looking mob enemies can actually be genuinely dangerous when you first fight them and don't know their patterns. You are always shown one of the enemy's actions, but you have to guess the rest. Enemies in the beginning have very easy to predict patterns, but later game enemies get a little more complex. As you fight the same enemy, you'll collect data from beating them and the game will show you more of their actions. So the first couple times are the hardest, when you have nothing to go off of and have to guess how they'll act. This is bad for caster where only a few bad guesses can lead to her getting killed. What's worse is that you can't save in the dungeon, so if you die, you have to do the whole thing over again. This is real classic dungeon crawling. It is frustrating to lose progress because of bad guesses. I guess this is what I get for choosing caster. If I had to say something positive about this system, it is that it does feel somewhat rewarding to finally figure out enemy patterns and no longer have difficulty with them. The servant battles are the real highlight of the game. They're neat spectacles as well as fairly challenging. The game has so much build up to these battles, so developers definitely put the most care into them. All the servants have cool animations and a unique noble phantasm. I think the way the servants' attack patterns match their personality is well done. For example, the second servant you have to fight, an archer, uses underhanded tactics like poison, and is admittedly not good with straightforward one-on-one battles. This is mirrored in his own fight by having him frequently use guard to try and protect himself and counter. Of course, his special moves also employ poison. I think this harmony between gameplay and narrative is quite interesting. To summarize, while this rock paper scissors gameplay is divisive, and even I got tired of it after a while, it has a few charming qualities. The dungeon design itself is also mediocre. They are, for the most part, linear hallways. There are some branching or hidden paths that can lead to items, but they're all very straightforward, which makes navigating them rather dull. It doesn't help that you'll be visiting the dungeon every day, and you'll get accustomed to new floors very quickly. I think each new part of the dungeon you get access to every week should have had a unique gimmick or something, which might have annoyed some, but would have made exploration more exciting. Even some light puzzle elements would have been an improvement. As it is, the most you'll get is having to leave the dungeon when you encounter an obstacle, and come back the next day with a method to overcome the obstacle. The real devious part of the design of these dungeons is that they're small enough to be quickly completed if you know where you're going, yet also big enough that it's annoying to have to redo all your progress when you die. It does make taking on new enemies and being uncertain of the outcome a bit more tense because losing the time you spent exploring does hurt. I do think the aesthetics of the dungeons are fairly neat. I like the sea theme it goes with, based off the sea of information contained within the moon cell. I've talked a lot about the gameplay, so let's switch gears and talk about the story and characters. Hakuno is our protagonist, and I think the way they're handled is fascinating. With the ability to choose their gender and name, you'd think they'd be another self-insert protagonist like the one in Fate Grand Order. However, this isn't quite the case. Hakuno has their own personality and development they go through in the story. There's a lot of emphasis on their internal monologue, figuring out who they are and their reason for fighting. Parts of them are blank, like their past, which makes it easier for the audience to project themselves onto. The dialogue options give you a chance to roleplay Hakuno and slightly define your own version of them. I think they strike a nice balance between a fully defined character like Shiro Emiya and a self-insert. I certainly feel Hakuno is handled better than modern Persona protagonists, who would benefit from having monologues or any character development at all. I wouldn't say that Hakuno is my favorite Type Moon protagonist or anything, but they are likable, and had more going for them than I originally assumed. As I touched on before, unlike all the other masters in the Grail War, who gain their true memories back after completing the preliminaries, Hakuno has amnesia. They don't know who they are, or why they're in the Grail War. This puts them in a unique position. All of the masters they have to face have their own ideals and a wish they want granted by the Holy Grail. Unlike all of them, Hakuno doesn't have a reason to fight besides survival. Of course, surviving in the Holy Grail War means trampling over the dreams of others. It's kill or be killed. A big part of Hakuno's development is them finding a reason to fight, besides purely survival. All of the masters Hakuno encounters leaves a lasting effect on them, and contributes to their development. Hakuno wants the deaths they cause to have meaning, because the guilt of killing people for the sole purpose to preserve their own life would be too much. Hakuno's journey of self-discovery is extremely compelling, and it really surprised me when I first played it. Naturally, your servant is also a pretty great character. I tend to be biased towards Castor, but all three are fantastic. To gush a bit about why I love Castor so much, he's not only Hakuno's servant, he's also Hakuno's self-proclaimed wife. He's constantly supportive of Hakuno, never wavering in her dedication towards them, even though Hakuno started off weak. He has fun interactions not only with Hakuno, but also with the enemies they face. Her backstory is also great and explains why she's such a devoted servant. Most importantly though, she has a fluffy tail. Saber is another interesting character. I feel like she's been reduced to an Umu meme machine nowadays because of FGO, but in Extra she is a genuinely wonderful character. She acts as Hakuno's sword, but is also willing to confront Hakuno over their flaws. She's confident, cool, and kind of hard to approach at first. He has an appreciation of beauty, and I love how her relationship plays out with Hakuno. He's a close second favorite, right behind Castor. She balances between being a cute character and a serious character very well. Archer should look very familiar to those who read Fate Stay Night. He's about what you expect, stern, somewhat cynical, yet still good-natured. Much like in Stay Night, I kinda get the impression that he tries hard to be seen as cool. All three of them are real good, and they complement Hakuno well. They all have their own unique rooms, which I think also do a good job of showing off their personality. You can tell a bit about them from how they decide to decorate and relax in the same classroom. Archer's room is probably my favorite. He's recreating the iconic pose he does when he's first summoned in Stay Night. I like how the room itself can develop with the cosmetic items you get from completing Taiga's side quests. You get some real cute decorations from her. Shinji Mato has always been one of my favorite Fate characters. He gets a lot of hate in Fate Stay Night for being a bit of a scumbag, but that's precisely why I love him. He's a bastard, but a very well written and even sympathetic bastard. Extra Shinji is about what you expect, but with a few twists on his character. I think the prologue does a magnificent job at showing what Shinji is all about. He's an arrogant, self-centered kid that believes himself to be far grander than he actually is. His personality is almost immediately contrasted against Leo, a boy who simply is above most others. Leo doesn't need to boast of his status or lord his superiority above others. Such regal superiority is self-evident from his demeanor. He is the real deal, everything that Shinji wishes he was. That is why he immediately hates Leo. He's jealous of him. He's later assigned as Hakuno's first opponent in the Holy Grail War. He does a fantastic job of being an introductory rival. He's someone dumb enough to accidentally give away too much information about a servant, which showcases the importance of information in the battles between servants. He treats the Holy Grail War as a game, not taking it truly seriously. As the week goes on, he gets increasingly desperate after realizing Hakuno might pose an actual threat, going as far as to try to block the entrance to the dungeon. This all culminates in the fated battle against him, where he puts on a brave face, but is uneasy. In his typical arrogant way, he tells Hakuno they should just give up without a fight because he's sure to win anyway, but it's easy to tell that he's bluffing. The fight goes as you might expect it to, ending with a shocking twist that makes all of Shinji's childish behavior make perfect sense as well as hammer the point home of the cost of losing these battles. Much like Shinji in Fate Stay Night, he's a tragic character. He wants the respect and admiration of others. Hell, he believes he deserves it because of his hacker skills. Yet his obnoxious personality only pushes people away. People in the game will admit that his hacking is remarkable, but his unpleasantness makes most dislike him. Hakuno and the guy in the prologue seem to be his only genuine friends, the only people willing to tolerate him. Much like his Stay Night incarnation, he always seemed somewhat insecure, afraid that he can't match up to others, and tries to hype himself up as the greatest to compensate. In the prologue, he says that the reason he's friends with the false protagonist is that he's so boring that he doesn't have to fear him stealing the spotlight from Shinji. This might sound like a mean thing to say, but put another way, he fears that being around more competent people would make him look lacking in comparison. One final note, I love his relationship with his servant, Ryder. He's like an older sister towards him, more emotionally mature and self-aware of her villainous nature. He makes a good pair of Shinji, both playing off each other really well. He doesn't know how to deal with her while she's the only one that can brush off his unwelcoming attitude. It's cute. Speaking of master-servant pairs, I think they're exceptionally well done in Extra. Each pair has a unique, memorable relationship. One of my favorite examples of this is Dan Blackmore and his servant Archer. These two are your second opponents after Shinji. These two follow-up Shinji are a stark contrast to him and his relationship to Ryder. Let me explain. Dan is the complete opposite to Shinji. He's an honorable knight who conducts himself with the utmost dignity and honor. However, while Shinji and Archer get along swimmingly, Dan and Archer have a rocky relationship. Throughout the week, Those two are constantly at odds about how to approach their upcoming battle of Hakuno. Dan, being the honorable knight that he is, wants an upfront fight at the appointed time. Archer thinks differently. He attempts to ambush and poison Hakuno numerous times throughout the preparation period. He's someone who excels at these underhanded methods and doesn't understand Dan's insistence on upholding chivalry instead of playing to his own strengths. It gets to the point where Dan uses a command seal to order Archer to stop going behind his back with his assassination attempts. This friction between the two is really interesting, with how different their beliefs and worldviews are. You'd think they'd be incompatible, but there's a reason they're together. By the end, they both admit they were wrong in a way. Dan realizes that his own pride held Archer back from fighting to his full potential, also trampling on his dignity as a servant. Meanwhile, Archer admits he was envious of Dan's honor and approached the battle. He had always wanted to fight fairly at least once, but it's simply his nature to fight from the shadows. They both complement each other well, both laying the other's flaws bare. It's ultimately a simple relationship like that of a strict father and his rebellious son, but it is compelling. Rin Tosaka and Ranni VIII are the ones who could be considered the main heroines of the game. Rin, while technically a different character to her Fate/stay night counterpart, has mostly the same lovable personality you remember. In the beginning, she takes the role of Hakuno's reluctant ally. While she believes that all of the masters are potential enemies, she's too kind-hearted to not give the clueless Hakuno a few pointers for how to stay alive. It's very similar to how she treated Shiro in Stay Night, where she outwardly acts cold, but it's clear that she does care. Ranni, on the other hand, is a completely new character. She's a homunculus, sent by the Atlas Institute to participate in the Holy Grail War. He also ends up helping Hakuno with finding out information on their opponents and overcoming obstacles they face in the dungeon. I strongly suspect that she was inspired by Rei Ayanami, much the same way Alice Kuonji was. She's emotionless and believes herself to be a mere tool for a creator. What makes me call these two the heroines of the game is that there's a point in the story where it splits into two different routes, one for each of them. If having 3 different servants didn't already give extra decent replay value, these 2 routes added to it even more. Which girl you choose changes what characters you'll face and which of the girls you'll bond with. I think the choice is obvious, really. Rin Tosaka is a character more familiar to the audience. He's a fan favorite from Fate/stay night and has been constantly reliable and extra. Ranni is more of an unknown element. He has been helpful to Hakuno, but she's more mysterious and enigmatic. That's why, on my initial playthrough, I went with Ranni. I was intrigued by Ranni and wanted to know more about her. I'm glad I did because she's a pretty great character. She develops a lot during her route, learning more about what it means to be human. I think her relationship with Hakuno is super cute. It's sad that some will miss out on her route because Rin is more popular. Rin's route is also good, don't get me wrong. Her beliefs and goals resonate strong with the main themes of the game. Her route is even more interesting if you have Archer with you. Anyway, Ranni and Rin are both valid, but I tend to err on the side of Ranni. The marionette that becomes human thing simply speaks to my soul. The last important character I'll talk about is Leonardo Bistario Haraway. He's one of the primary antagonists of the narrative. He's immediately established as a character that stands head and shoulders above the rest. He's the heir to the Haraway family, an extremely influential power in the Extraverse that controls 60% of the world. He's here to claim the Holy Grail and save the world by bringing stability. He's such a fascinating character in how he's handled and characterized. From the moment he's introduced, you know he'll be a problem eventually. Despite his cooperative and easygoing personality, he's established as potentially being the most powerful master to enter the war. He carries himself with such confidence. He doesn't hesitate to use his servant's true name openly. It goes beyond mere confidence. It's more like the possibility of defeat never even creeps into his mind. He's someone born with power, destined to be a leader to the world. He's an antagonist, but he's an evil. He sincerely believes that he can save humanity using the Holy Grail. However, his idea of stability might not be ideal for humanity in the long run. One of the major themes of the game is the safety of stability leading to stagnation versus the uncertainty created through progress. Leo is the ultimate representation of the idea of stagnation, someone who's unable to change or grow because he believes himself to already stand at the top. All in all, he's a phenomenal character that's easily one of the best in the game. The vibes of Fate Extra are unmatched. It's difficult to exactly quantify vibes, but I'll try. Running around the school is something I always found enjoyable. The NPCs usually have new things to say every day. They react to the events going on in the story, and also have their own things going on. There are little storylines going on with these NPCs that you can kind of keep up with. For example, early on there's 2 masters who were apparently in a relationship before entering the Holy Grail War. The 2 vow to help each other survive, though it's evident the guy puts more effort into helping his partner obtain information at the cost of neglecting to prepare for his own battles. This eventually has a predictably tragic end. You can totally miss out on this stuff if you don't talk to NPCs, I think this is a rare case where going out of my way to talk to NPCs was worthwhile. It reminded me a bit of talking to Kiseki NPCs. Another thing I loved was how the school had gradually fewer people in it as the Grail War went on. It's a grim reminder of the human cost to the war, without needing to draw obvious attention to it. The music is exceptional. It's very jazzy. I think it goes perfectly for running around the school and exploring dungeons. The artwork for characters was done by the incredible Wada Arko. I think Wada Arko is one of my favorite artists that's worked with Type Moon. She has a very distinctive style that's beautiful to look at. I only wish there was more CGs, but the character sprites are all good. The character models themselves aren't too impressive by modern standards, but I think they have that PSP charm. The game is full of soul. For the rest of the video, I'll go into spoiler territory, going more in depth about some of the characters and themes of the game. Naturally, I'll talk about the ending as well. If you've made it this far and still haven't played Fate Extra, then you really should, especially if you like Fate Stay Night and other spin-offs. It might be a bit old, but it holds up extremely well. You just have to power through the admittedly slightly frustrating rock-paper-scissors combat. If you can do that, you'll discover the enthralling story underneath. Getting a legit physical copy nowadays might be a bit problematic, but fortunately emulating PSP games is simple. Emulation is my recommended way of playing it, so go on and give it a try. Spoiler discussion starts now. Okay, so those more familiar with Extra might have noticed that there was one fairly important character I neglected to mention. That's Julius. He's a brilliant character that really stood out to me, but it's difficult to talk about what makes him so compelling without spoiling anything. As we know, he's set up very early to be a force to be reckoned with. He even attempts to assassinate Hakuno early on, only to be interrupted by Rin. Although he is loyal to Leo, he doesn't quite seem to see eye to eye with him. This scene caught my interest because it got me questioning why Julius is so loyal towards Leo. That question is finally answered when you get some flashbacks of his childhood. Julius is the only character you get an in-depth look into his psyche like this, which is also really cool. Anyway, Julius is actually Leo's older bastard brother, but was deemed a failure since birth. He was only kept around as a potentially useful attack dog. The only one who ever showed him any warmth or love was Leo's mother, despite not being blood related to Julius. Eventually, the Harway family ordered Julius to kill her, which he reluctantly did. This moment shaped his entire life going forward. Leo's mother left him with her last wish, for Julius to take care of Leo. Fulfilling her last words became Julius' sole reason to live, his raison d'etre. There doesn't seem to be much love between the two brothers. Their bond is hardly familial. It's more like one between king and subject. To follow the themes of the game about the dangers of stagnation, Julius himself has been unable to grow since he killed Leo's mother. It understandably traumatized him and led him to never being able to live for himself, instead devoting everything to Leo. For Julius, entering the Holy Grail War was certain death. No matter what, he had given up on his own future the moment he entered the Moon Cell. He knew that there could only be one winner of this war, and he was determined to be sure it was Leo. Hakuno is his natural enemy, them being symbolic of progress and change. Despite his best attempts and even returning from death, he could not overcome Hakuno's desire to live for the future. However, he is able to find salvation in his last moments when Hakuno is the first one to truly sympathize with him since Leo's mother. In the end, he's a beautifully tragic character. Let's bring it back to Leo, the would-be ruler himself. I mentioned that he was the strongest master in the war earlier. Then why does Hakuno beat him? He has such supreme intelligence, sublime skills, and a nearly invincible servant. The reason for Hakuno's victory is obvious. It's because Leo had never known defeat. Hakuno started off as a weakling, only barely managing to survive their constant ordeals. However, these constant trials allowed the player and Hakuno to grow. We learn the enemy's patterns and adapt, becoming wiser and allowing our servants to use more of their full power. No matter how insurmountable the opponent assigned to Hakuno, they found a way to win, and they became stronger for it, represented literally through levels and stats. They constantly had to surpass their limits and grow. Leo, on the other hand, never had to overcome such ordeals. Since he was born, he had never known true strife. He had everything handed to him, molded to be the ideal ruler of humanity. His inherent superiority was something reinforced by all those around him in his life. The irony of all this is that such a seemingly perfect person would never be able to understand ordinary people. He was missing something fundamental to being human. Sorrow, pain, overcoming hardships. These are all things everyone has to go through, but were alien to Leo. He was stagnant, unchanging because he had never had to grow as a person. He's an obvious parallel to Saber in Fate Stay Night, and how she tried to uphold her idea of an ideal ruler, though that meant missing out on integral parts of the human experience. Gawain seems to take notice of Leo's weakness and similarity to his previous liege, yet he never confronted Leo about these issues to help him grow. Fate Extra is a story about the importance of avoiding stagnation by overcoming hardships and moving forward towards the future. Of course, Leo would never have worked as leader. His wish for stability would spell doom for humanity. It's like something Rin says in Fate Stay Night. But don't get me wrong, if the Holy Grail can truly grant any wish, permanent world peace is the worst wish ever. It means there's nothing, right? A world without conflict is dead. If things aren't moving, all they do is rot. The world that Leo would wish for would be a dead world. Without any progress, humanity would eventually die out. Wishing for a world like this is like meekly accepting death. This is a theme that's explored in Fate Grand Order's Lost Belts as well. It's something that must fascinate Nasu. Leo finally understands the folly of his wish when he's defeated. If he had been challenged or had been forced to grow like Hakuno had, perhaps he would have stood a chance. The sad thing about Leo is that he was never even able to truly live for himself. He was only ever doing what was expected of him. His actions and wish for humanity were never for the sake of himself. He was so focused on trying to save humanity that he never really considered what he wanted as a person. Hakuno doesn't have such altruistic goals. They only fight for themselves and their friends. However, those personal goals are more meaningful to them, which I think is another big reason why they're able to surpass even Leo. Twice, H. Peaceman is a character introduced in the last 5 minutes of the game. His existence has been foreshadowed since the prologue. He exists on the opposite side of the spectrum from Leo. He wants to stimulate humanity's growth by starting a massive war. It is the only way to save humanity from its stagnation. Twice is so fascinating. He loathes war more than anyone else, yet believes it to be a necessary evil for humanity to progress. He may sound a little insane, but he has a legitimate point. Hakuno is living proof of his philosophy. As said before, Hakuno started off weak, but was able to grow strong by overcoming all the obstacles they faced in the Holy Grail War. Peaceman was the one who altered the Holy Grail War to be in this tournament style, to prove his own survival of the fittest style to be correct. While the story is about avoiding stagnation through overcoming conflict, Twice's philosophy is flawed. His methods are too extreme and would lead to too many pointless casualties. He loves humanity too much, to the point that he is willing to sacrifice millions to paradoxically grant them salvation. Ironically, he has also become stagnant. He's been stuck in front of the moon cell, unable to advance because he knows he'll be deleted when he enters, as is the fate of an NPC. This is how Hakuno surpasses him. They are the same, NPCs that woke to sentience. Hakuno knows they'll be deleted if they enter, but they do so anyway, have their wish fulfilled and end Twice's maniacal machinations. They did what Twice was too cowardly to do. People say that Twice is lacking as a character because he only shows up briefly at the very end. Everything about him is perfect. I love it. This whole confrontation with him is the perfect way to end it. He acts as a parallel to Hakuno, and as a reversal of Leo. Fate Extra's narrative takes a bit from Buddhism. The final boss is literally Buddha himself. I'm no expert on Buddhism, but I did a bit of research to better understand the story. So let me explain some interesting things I found. The preliminaries were all about realizing the false peace the mages were placed under, and coming to understand the truth of the world. It could be seen as rejecting Mara, as Buddha did. Mara is a demon that in Buddhism tried to tempt Buddha away from the path towards enlightenment. Mara is often seen to represent worldly desires. It might sound like a bit of a stretch, but breaking free of this illusion of the peaceful everyday is the first step towards Hakuno's journey to enlightenment. There are 7 rounds of the Holy Grail War, plus the final battle against Twice, a total of 8. Like the Noble Eightfold Path, the main 8 practices of Buddhism is believed to lead to nirvana. I don't think each round is supposed to literally symbolize a specific teaching, but rather just the number 8 itself is taken for the amount of boss fights and how it relates to Hakuno's journey towards enlightenment. What is more important, however, are the 4 noble truths. These 4 truths are the core of Buddhism. The first of these truths is understanding the pervasive presence of suffering in the everyday. Suffering is always present, in obvious and subtle forms. Coming to understand this truth could also be seen as the point of the preliminaries. To see this peaceful world without suffering is a lie, and realize the suffering involved in the Holy Grail War. The second of these truths is coming to understand the origin of suffering. Buddhism typically states that desire and ignorance are the prime causes of suffering. Fate Extra leans more into ignorance being the root cause of the caste's suffering. Almost every character has these flawed beliefs or illusions they refuse to let go of. Take Julius, for instance. Now all of his suffering stems from his inability to get over his past, or Dan's insistence on upholding honor. Leo, of course, has a misguided desire to be humanity's savior by using the Holy Grail. You could also say that the desire to use the Grail to grant one's selfish wish is also a core reasoning for most of the cast's suffering. It is what brought them into the Grail War after all. The third noble truth is the end of suffering, which is about escaping the cycle of suffering by reaching nirvana. The fourth noble truth is the truth of the end of suffering. It's essentially all about the Eightfold Path, now to reach nirvana. By this point, you may be wondering what nirvana is in the context of Fate Extra. I believe that to be the Holy Grail itself. Nirvana is the ultimate endpoint of following Buddhist principles and the Eightfold Path. And the Holy Grail is the ultimate goal of everyone participating in the Holy Grail War. By reaching the Holy Grail, one will be able to escape the cycle of suffering. The cycle of death and rebirth, samsara, is represented by the Holy Grail War itself. It's a system where people suffer and fight each other until there is only one left. And even that one is always killed by twice because they don't agree with his ideals. Thus, everything gets reset and the Grail War starts anew. New masters replace the old masters. They are all reborn, in a sense. The Grail War is a microcosm of the suffering caused by the cycle of violence in the real world, made this way by Twice himself, his own personal samsara. I assume the NPCs are also reborn in a sense every cycle, with Hakuno being one of those NPCs until they gain awareness. Throughout their journey to enlightenment, Hakuno comes to a much greater understanding of themselves, as well as their own reality. They become more human because of their experiences with others. They are able to empathize with their enemy's suffering. This journey culminates with Hakuno being the one to claim the Holy Grail and reach Nirvana, doing what no other character could. Even knowing that doing so would mean the end of their existence, Hakuno does not hesitate. Hakuno, true to their role in the story as a representation of change, is the one to break free from this samsara, this endless cycle of stagnation and death. That was Fate Extra. Flawed in gameplay, but full of heart and soul. I do have some problems with it, but it's still something that I had fun with in both my playthroughs. I think it's one of the better Fate spin-offs, along with Strange Fate. Also being the one to write it certainly helps. It's still interesting to me how these ideas of stagnation versus progress would later be used in Grand Order's Lost Belts. But this initial exploration of these ideas were handled very well. There are some characters here that I love that I wish weren't so underrated, like Leo, and Twice. Extra's legacy still lives on in the other games it spawned. Extra CCC seems to be a sequel of sorts, but I haven't actually got to play it yet. I wanted to make this video first. I might cover CCC sometime in the future when I do get around to it, because I hear it's a much improved game compared to Extra. I believe it. It even seems to have Gilgamesh this time. There's the Extella games as well, which I also haven't played, though I haven't heard anything good about them. Still, I might need to see for myself someday. As for the future, there's a remake of Extra called Fate Extra Record, which was announced in July 2020. 4 years later, and we still haven't seen much from it, and there is no release date in sight. I assume it's the Type Moon curse of announcing things too early. What little gameplay and such they did show looked great. They look beautiful. The models actually do justice to Wada Arco's style. I can't express how much I need this game. A version of Fate Extra that looks this good, with dungeons that are possibly fun to navigate, and maybe even improved gameplay? I can't wait. The future is looking bright for once. I can't believe how promising and hopeful it sounds. I can't wait for it to arrive. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.